Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shore.
Women Today.
So as part of the master's course, we do a 2-week field course in Kenya. So it's just to give people a bit more experience doing field work conservation. So towards the end of our 2.5 weeks in Kenya, we went to a village in Samburu, which is in the north of Kenya. And it was a village called Umoja Uwasu. Umoja means unity. We stayed in the campsite that's run by the village. There's been some quite sensationalist headlines about it, but it's basically a village that is just women. So men are allowed in the village, but they can't stay there unless they're children of the women who run the village. So in Kenyan culture and Samburu culture, women are they're seen second-class citizens. They don't have many rights. In 1990, there was 15 women from different communities who had either been ostracised by their community for various reasons or decided that they were going to leave their husbands, leave their communities, their families because of the abuse that they'd received. And these 15 women, just amazingly brave women, they got together and created this community, Umoja. So they've been there for 28 years. I think that it started with 15 women and they've been joined by people along the way. And now there's 50 women and I think about 200 children there as well. And it's a safe haven for women from the abuse that they can sometimes receive from husbands or from members of the community, but to try and build better lives for them and their children.
And, you say brave. I mean, it must have been such a difficult thing to do, because I dread to think how the men themselves reacted to this. They certainly, I'm imagining, won't have just allowed the women to go off and do this.
Well, it's a bit difficult. So some of the women kind of walked away and other women were ostracised by the villages. So it's a bit of a controversial area. Some of the women who founded the village were actually were raped by members of an army barracks that's close by, that's been there for about 50 years. When they told their husbands and they told their families and the village about it, the status of women is such that they basically were beaten and then kind of cast out of their communities. So some of them had to find something else and somewhere else to live, and other women, they've walked away from their husbands and they've had mixed reactions. Certainly once the village was established and they've had sort of success in various different areas, it's been really hard for them, obviously, and especially in the early days, the police support wasn't necessarily there either, but that's sort of changing, and particularly the chairwoman of the community, Rebecca, she's been fighting for more support from the police, which seems to be more forthcoming now.
Like you said, it has become a bit more known now, this, to the Western world. And partly, I suppose, because I think the women are sort of making use of the tourist trade, aren't they, to sort of sell beads and crafts and things that they're making, because they have to survive in some way. Yeah. And so there are sort of more Westerners aware of the village now. And there's this fascinating video. And it was a female presenter who went in to sort of experience the village. But then she did go and meet with some men as well and interviewed them, because I was fascinated to sort of see how the men had reacted to this. And some of the language that the men were using was, you just can't even imagine having this. So one of them was saying that the woman does not leave the man. When my wife left, the elders just advised me to get another wife. But at the same time, it sounds like the women of this village are going out of the way to try and sort of gently educate the men, because they do allow some men in the village, don't they?
Yeah, so I mean, the men, like I say, the sensationalist headlines that have been like the women-only village or men banned from the village, it's not the case. They are allowed in, but if the only people who can stay there, the only men that can stay there are the children of the women who live there, and that's obviously to create a safe place for women who have been abused and have experienced that horrendous experience. Yeah, but they are slowly sort of making those changes. Some of the changes that they have in the village are things like all children go to school regardless of gender. So in Samburu culture, girls don't necessarily get to go to school. So that's something that they've changed, and all of their children go to school, and they've actually, through the fundraising that they've done, they've funded for all their children to be educated. Something else that they've they've brought in the village is that female genital mutilation, which is again traditional in sort of Kenyan culture, Samburu culture. It is becoming less common, but it's totally banned in the village. So yeah, the female circumcision just doesn't happen there. And also child marriage. So in different villages, there's girls as young as 12 marrying men who may be old enough to be their grandfather. And again, that's and not by their own choice. They don't get to choose who they marry. And that's something that doesn't happen in Umoja. Women can choose when they marry and they choose who they marry. So there's small changes, or they seem like the small changes, but in that culture, it's massive. It's totally like changing the way that the people in that village grow up. So that also the boys that grow up in that village, they then have a totally different perspective on how to treat women. So those small changes will make big changes.
And that's so positive to hear. And in a way, you've sort of answered what my next question would be, because I was going to mention the fact that I suppose it is sort of a fine balance, isn't it, really, from protecting the women, and especially when you talk about the young women and educating them and sort of educating them in the correct way and not sort of just bringing them up to be men haters, which, that could be a concern.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely not what Umoja does, and it's not what the women there want to do. And there are other villages like this that have come up. There's a number of different villages around Kenya that are women-only villages. That small cultural change is happening, and it will snowball, and eventually, slowly but surely, those changes will happen. The stories that they were telling us, and particularly Rebecca was telling us, that they've gone through all that, and they've come out of it the other side, and that they've found a community, and they've founded a community that supports them and supports each other. They pool all of their funds and resources, so if any of them are having a hard time, if they're sick, then the community funds go to supporting those families that are having those hard times. It was really hard to hear those stories, because you never want to hear about another human being going through those things, but it also was incredibly optimistic and incredibly hopeful that there are people who go through these things and come out the other side, and what they want to do is to fight for other people to not have to go through those things. So it was incredibly optimistic and hopeful.
And actually, by the sound of things, a lot of the things you're talking about as well, I think there is a lot for us to learn from that, isn't there?
Yeah, I think the sense of community that they have is quite incredible, and the fact that they are there to support each other, and that one family going through hardship will be supported by another family. And I think that sense of community, and it is there in other cultures, in a lot of sort of South Pacific cultures. On the Isle of Man, we definitely have it more than other areas, but I think it's something that we could definitely sort of grasp back more, and especially in such a small and beautiful place, I think we could value each other more and support each other more.
Women Today. Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin, or click shaw.com. Love being Shaw. Terms and conditions apply.